I grew up in Mayfield, Kentucky, population about 11,000, and I started drinking and drugging when I was 11 years old. First time I got drunk, I was 11. I blacked out, I passed out, I came to, and I wanted to do it again. And from there on, I was in trouble all the time. I was diagnosed as an alcoholic at 13 years old. I was diagnosed with a variety of mental illnesses. I ended up coming to Florida to get out of trouble. My drug addiction skyrocketed at that point, and then I transgressed into running the streets of Sarasota in a size 9 blue flip-flop and a 10.5 red one, and only one pair of jeans to my name. And the next night, I went to my first 12-step meeting, and I fell in love with it at the first meeting. Fell in love with it. If I'd have had to come back and lie just so I could have felt like I fit in, I would have come back and lied, but I didn't have to lie. I was definitely an addict. And, but that was not my worst bottom. My worst bottom was my battle with bipolar. I picked up a 16-year sobriety medallion in a mental ward. I've had so many different diagnoses, and at one time I felt like the doctors were just throwing darts at a board on what medications to give me. And after about 1.5 years of that, I ended up in a homeless shelter, and they sent me to a doctor that got me the right diagnosis, which was bipolar, and got me on the right meds, and I started recovering. I started getting my mind back. My therapist, while I was living in the homeless shelter, I told him about everything that was happening, and of course I was trying to hold on to some kind of pride, something to be proud of. I told him about the first book I wrote. I told him about the Course in Miracles class. I told him I'd been sober for 23 years. Simultaneously, I was crying my eyes out and talking to him about suicide. And when I was done, he said, "You're not going to like what I got to say." And I said, "Probably means I need to hear it." He said, "You don't know who God is." He said, "Until you get God in this mix, you're going to stay nuts." He said, "So I suggest you go back to the homeless shelter. You sit down and write a letter to you from God." And I did that every day for over 5 years. I didn't know at the time what I was doing, but I think looking back and understanding it now, what I was doing, I was changing my inner dialogue. Because my inner dialogue was always about self-abuse and self-sabotage. And even though most people would have thought of me as being positive, but my self-talk, my internal talk was like, it was bad. But in those letters, the messages were always encouraging, gentle, kind, loving, like a parent, like a true parent would do. And I reparented myself through those letters. And it changed how I feel about myself, how I think about myself, how I think about the world. After you've been traumatized, everything you encounter frightens you. And because you've been traumatized, you don't have a space between thought and reaction. You just react. He said, so you got to get connected to something so you can create that space, so you can have a thought process before you just fight or flight. He said that's what traumatized people do. They fight or they fly. And that was so my life. And so those letters were my beginning. And today, my life is about helping people have a voice. Because when you've been molested as a child, when you've been traumatized by your parents, all those things, you shut down. And you don't think it's okay to speak about those things. So my life, seriously, is about letting people know it's okay to speak up. Not only is it okay, it's necessary to speak up.